This is entertainment, educational only. And we mentioned in our last stock market update this blue line. And you'd have to watch a few older videos, but it's pretty much from Fibonacci numbers. And you can see we hit resistance, came back to the 50-day moving average, hit resistance, came back to the 50-day moving average, broke through it, but just with a doji, not a confirming at all. And then we came back up, and it looks like we broke through it, except we didn't have one of these days where we had a negative or a low to a high. It was all pretty much dojis. Maybe you'd call this a low to a high, except it wasn't confirmed. And so I guess it was never confirmed, and it came back down to the 50-day moving average. And so the question is, what's going to happen now? Now, there's a few options. One really simple option is if it breaks through the 50-day moving average, we could either have one of these doji situations or more likely come down and test the 450 level. You can see over here, it was resistance, over here, support, and so it's very likely for that to happen, very possible. We'll have to wait and see what happens. And if it does break through the 50-day moving average, if it doesn't do one of these dojis, it's likely gonna come down all the way over here, and hopefully that'll hold as support. So that's one option, and that's a pretty strong option. The other strong option I can see is that we have kind of this triangle forming. Now, it's not exactly well formed because you can see the base isn't in line here. It kind of breaks through there over there, but not, like I said, not with a confirming day exactly. So it's very likely that we kind of have this triangle going on over here, and it doesn't always go to the end, but similar kind of situation. If we break down, we likely come back to the 450. But of course, triangles can always also break up in the positive direction, and so that would be a really good sign. Now, of course, if it breaks this blue line 2 days with confirming positive movement, now it's kind of like this blue line will act as support and no longer resistance. That would be pretty positive. And so whatever I just said is pointless anyway. But I see those other two options as the most likely in the meantime anyway, either coming down to the 450 and testing that support or meandering up. And then the question will be, does it break up in the positive or break down in the negative? And of course, if we break out of a triangle, it's going to be pretty violent. However, sometimes it comes back and to the point of the triangle, but usually it's a pretty strong move in the positive or negative direction and pretty fast. Now, the other things we can look at to try and gain kind of an understanding, we kind of drew these channels of the S&P 500, and we extended the channel down because of what happened in September and October, and you can see it's been acting pretty accurately over here. Whoops. And you can see actually in the past, we came pretty close over here to the channel bottom. And so the question is, if we do break the 50-day moving average with a doji or something like that, or to the 450 level, we're going to be leaving the channel over here. So if we do, it'd have to be really fast and back right up in that time if we leave, either within the day or two, and certainly with a doji or something, nothing strong. Because otherwise, if we're leaving the channel, that could signal something really bad, a new negative trend maybe, or a sideways trend at the best. So we'll have to keep our eye on what happens with this channel and what's going on. And hopefully we will eventually make it back into this kind of upper channel, or where we kind of were for the past year or so, really hovering mostly in that upper half of the channel. So that will make me feel a lot more comfortable. Now, in terms of what else we can see going on here, well, we can look at the VIX, and you can see kind of a triangle forming, and it looks oddly familiar to this triangle where, it didn't quite hit the base over here, just like over here, but it lower and lower highs. But nevertheless, it came down to the point. Doesn't have to come to the point this time, right? It could break out pretty violently just from here. That would be not abnormal for a triangle, and that would be us hitting the 450, I'm sure. Or it could kind of meander down, and that would be the forming of the triangle, where it would have to make a decision. Is the VIX going to break up? And that would likely mean a very strong move of the S&P 500 down. Or, you never know, maybe it'll break, the triangle will break in the downward direction, and that would be a positive thing for the S&P 500 moving up. Now, the one thing that I will talk about here, leaning my direction, is the 10-year Treasury. And we've been talking about this quite a bit. We had this triangle drawn, and we weren't quite right. We kind of drew the end of the triangle here. It's just a little bit longer, but it broke out pretty violently. This is what I'm talking about with triangles, and you can see them over here as we've been drawing them. This one we drew over here, once again, a little bit short, we thought, and then we kind of extended it, and yeah, it broke out. And we had triangles moving all along here with all of our market updates. So kind of, I think a pretty strong indicator, the triangle, of showing a pretty violent move. Now, right now, we're at the highest it's been in the past 2 years for interest rates. Obviously not the highest it's been in a long time, but nevertheless, interest rates were higher quite some time ago, or at this level, I should say. So nothing crazy. The only crazy part, I suppose, is how fast it's moved. And it's really far from the 10-day moving average, and that's the exponential moving average. So certainly overbought. You'd expect this thing to slow down, but I think it is still going to trend higher, possibly. Why do I say that? Well, at the moment, what I'm looking at are two things. One thing is the CCI. So this overbought situation, it keeps being pretty high, and the last time it was this high was over here at this situation. And you can see that, yes, it did keep going up a little bit, but not with strength, doji, and calmed down. Nevertheless, it still kept going up, but it took a breath. So that's kind of what I'm expecting. Maybe another doji, I'm not entirely sure, but for it to take a breath. However, you can see over here the red line, the directional movement indicator showing a direction or a trend is between the negative and the positive pressures, buying power, let's call it, buying and selling. So when it gets between those, that kind of shows a trend. And so it was really trending here. The negative came back up, but then it became positive again. And so you're kind of seeing this breathing going on back and forth as the negative, the selling becomes less of a pressure, the buying becomes less of a pressure. So that's kind of what you're seeing in the past. However, over here, we're seeing this red line with a big distance between the selling and the buying. And, here's the issue, I suppose. And if you look at the DMI over here, that's the red number. It's at 22.7, much higher than it was over here, which is at 15. And so this is showing a really strong direction. And so it'll have to really take a breath or a real strong slowdown to break this trend. And so pretty much what I'm seeing is, or what I'm feeling towards, is that if it does take a breather, right, that would lend credence to that kind of triangle formation we were talking about in the S&P 500. But this thing is still trending upward. I don't see this trend being broken anytime soon. And so when it does take that breath, we have to reanalyze, is the red line still going to be in between the negative and the positive? Meaning, when it takes the breath, does it still meander up? And so we still kind of have that direction? Or does it come back down and take a breath and shoot back down to this blue line? Then we might have broken this indicator. But until we break this indicator, I'm still going to lean towards this thing is going up. And especially everything happening with inflation, sadly, that kind of makes a lot of sense. So right now, that's going to mean higher interest rates, and higher interest rates means people are going to move their money in the bond market out of the stock market. And so that's kind of why I'm seeing this 450 being likely. And if we do break the triangle, being very likely that we go in the downward direction. Now, stranger things always happen, but that's kind of where I'm leaning. Like I said, just educational, entertainment advice. Take this with a huge grain of salt and do your own research. But that's kind of the things I'm looking at right now in general for the stock market. And it's a little bit scary. Does this mean it's the end? No, it could recover. It could have a small correction. This is not necessarily the big correction or crash that we're kind of waiting for just because markets are so frothy. It could still go on quite some time. But nevertheless, something to be aware of and something to keep our eyes on. You let me know what you think is happening in the stock market. You let me know what you think is happening with inflation and treasury rates. Do you think they're going to bump up the treasury rate? You can watch the tapering video I put out of some sneaky things they could do to really slow down this 10-year treasury and slow down the interest rates being climbed up. But nevertheless, those are kind of my thoughts, what's happening with the stock market. And let me know any stocks you want me to go in depth. And of course, always appreciate the like, and let me know if you like these videos or what you'd like better, or, something along those lines. Any constructive criticism, great. Thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate it.